Hey y'all, how's it going? This is Professor Shipley. We're about to record the first lecture for the COVID-19 pandemic disaster of a semester that we've got going on here. I hope this finds you all doing well, staying healthy, trying to keep your spirits up. To help you on that quest, we've got some stuff on the Texas judicial system today. The PowerPoint's going to pop up for you here in just a second. Suffice it to say, this is weird. This is the first time I've had to give a lecture in my own home. It's also the first time I've ever had to give a lecture on a camera. So hopefully this works itself out. We shall see, I suppose. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So, we're talking about the judicial system in Texas today. This PowerPoint will get posted so you can follow along with it directly if you want to have it. It'll certainly have all of this information available to you as well. So, state versus federal courts, that'll be our first stop. In the United States, we have what's called a dual court system. What that means is we have a federal court system that deals with federal law, with federal prosecutors, federal judges, federal juries. If you get convicted of a crime, you go to federal prison. And then separate from that, we have state courts, we have a state legal code, we have state prosecutors and state police. If they arrest you, you will end up in those state courts. If you're convicted, you'll go to state prison. And it's a totally separate system. Very rarely will a case go from one to the other. So you can have a crime that is both a federal crime and a state crime. It is always a crime to commit murder. But if you get arrested in Texas for committing a murder in Texas of another Texas citizen and you're arrested by Texas police, then you're going to go to a Texas court system. You're going to get convicted, you're going to be sent to a Texas jail, and it could be that it's a Texas execution chamber that you end up in. So pro tip, if you're going to commit murder, you might as well run for it. At that point, maybe you can end up in a federal court. Probably not likely. Chances are they'll just send you back to Texas. But, the feds are less likely to put you to death. So the vast majority of cases that are going to come up are going to be in state court. That's where you're most likely to run into the legal system. It's going to be at the state level. If you're not sure, figure out who arrested you. If they were wearing a uniform with a badge on it, chances are you're going to state court. If they were wearing, a cheap black suit, chances are those were the feds, and you're going to end up in the federal system. So the dual court system looks something like this. And wouldn't it be nice if we had a Texas system that was simple and straightforward? So the dual court system, you'll see if you kind of follow along with the little laser pointer thing here. This is the divide. So cases end up in either the federal system or the state system. The only chance that you're going to have for state cases to make their way to the federal system is at the level of the U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court can hear state cases if there's some sort of constitutional issue at play. Otherwise, state stuff stays at the state level, federal stuff stays at the federal level. We're going to really quickly just kind of hit the federal side of things because it's the way that courts make sense. The federal court system makes logical sense. And the federal court system, if you are arrested, you are going to go to district court. If you're trying to sue somebody according to federal law in the federal court system, you're going to start out at district court. So district court is the court that you think of when you think of court. This is where you have attorneys on both sides, you have a jury hearing all the facts, you have a judge presiding over things, and you have a trial, right? So the judge is going to decide what evidence can be used, what can be presented. They're going to administrate the proceedings. You're going to have two teams of attorneys fighting it out. Your jury is going to hear all the information, and the jury is going to render a decision. In district courts, we have what are called findings of fact. They're the ones that are going to decide whether you're guilty. If you think that your trial was not fair, if you think that evidence was presented that shouldn't have been presented, if you think that the attorneys, either your own, didn't do their job right, or the other attorneys were violating the law and violating your rights, then you have the courts of appeal. No juries in the courts of appeal. Instead, you're going to have judges who are going to hear the case that you want to make, that your trial wasn't fair, and they will ultimately decide whether you had a fair trial and everything stands, or what they can do in the courts of appeal is to simply say your trial was not fair. They can declare that district court null and void, and they can say give this person another trial. The U.S. Supreme Court is basically a court of appeal on steroids. They're going to do the same basic stuff. They're not going to generally hold a trial, although there are some rare cases where that might happen. We talk about that in American government course. But realistically, they are in just another court of appeal, the highest possible court of appeal. And in the U.S. system, there's just those three levels. There's the three type of courts. There's nothing crazy or confusing about it. This graphic here makes it look like on the state side that it's the same thing: state and local trial court, appeals court, Supreme Court, and then potentially a petition up to the U.S. Supreme Court. If Texas were that simple and straightforward, it would be lovely. Unfortunately, Texas really isn't. So what you have here are just some generalities. We mentioned every state is going to have its own court system. Every state's going to have a slightly different structure. They're going to do things a little differently. Texas, we are very weird in terms of how we set up our court system. But everybody's going to have trial court, appeals court, Supreme Court. Every state's going to be a little different on how they pick judges. That has its own set of issues, because judges, after all, are the ones who get to decide, within a particular case, what is legal, what's acceptable. It's going to be judges that are going to hear the appeals. In Texas, we're one of a handful of states that just straight up elects our judges. We'd make them declare political parties. They have to fundraise. They have to advertise and try to get your vote. A lot of states will have elections for judges. Generally speaking, the way that they'll set that up is going to be nonpartisan. And most states will have some sort of merit-based system whereby judges get appointed. They have to be approved by some board of experts. And then we, the people, get to vote every so often whether we want to keep that judge around or not. Texas, like I said, handful of states where we just straight up make them run for election just like any other politician. There's another video that's going to come up. It's a John Oliver video that kind of gets into some different examples of partisan elections and the problems that go into elections generally of judges. So I'll kind of defer to that on giving you more of the details. So let's get a little terminology out of the way. Jurisdiction, when we talk about jurisdiction, that's what sort of cases a particular court can hear. So original jurisdiction means the first court that you will go to. So that's going to be your trial court. That's going to be the court that if you get arrested, you're going to end up in your original jurisdiction court. That's going to be the same court that you imagine from like television, the same district court or trial court that we talked about earlier. Appellate jurisdiction is going to be when cases get reviewed. What we need to take note of is that in appeals court, they will never consider matters of fact. In the American system, only a jury can decide your guilt or innocence. It's never the case that a judge, let me backtrack there. On rare occasion, especially for low-level stuff, and on rare occasion for higher-level things, you can have a judge actually render a bench trial as opposed to a jury trial. But generally speaking, in the American system, because you're innocent until proven guilty, the only person who can decide your guilt, or the only people, are going to be that jury. They're going to hear all the facts and they get to decide. Did you pull the trigger? Did the bullet exit the chamber? Did it leave the gun? Did it enter the victim's body? Did it cause their death? And if the answer to all those things is yes, well then, by golly, you've got yourself a murder conviction. So the appeals court, they can't decide that you're innocent. Only a jury can decide that. What an appeals court can do is decide whether the law was properly applied. So if you are guilty, if you are found guilty, you can appeal, but you cannot appeal on the basis of, but I'm actually innocent. Nobody cares. Once the jury says you're guilty, as far as America, as far as the state of Texas, as far as anybody else is concerned in the legal system, you're guilty. What you can appeal is not all the evidence was allowed, something improper happened in the course of the trial, and the appeals court can say, yes, we agree with you, the trial wasn't a fair trial, and they can void the result of that trial. And send it back to have another trial or finish the case at that point. And then the last one that we should throw out there is the idea of civil law versus criminal law. This is basically criminal law if you're arrested by the police for violating a law. Civil law is if you need to sue somebody or if you're being sued by somebody, would be a civil case. So criminal versus civil. Judicial elections in Texas, we mentioned before, are partisan. Judges have to run with the support of either the Republican or the Democratic Party. They do raise campaign funds. There are limits. This is the only place in Texas where we have decided that money can corrupt the process. So the maximum amount that you are personally allowed to give to a judge running for re-election is $5,000. And then your organization that you belong to can give $25,000. So it's not unheard of in Texas for big-time law firms, especially those that spend a lot of time before the state Supreme Courts, to give $25,000 to a Supreme Court judge. And then for most of the people in the law firm to give a few $1,000s as well. That happens. Pay attention in the John Oliver video, because there's a case out of Houston where you're going to hear about a judge who blackmailed attorneys basically to remind them that it would be in their best interest to go ahead and donate to his campaign. In Texas, if there is a vacancy between elections, the governor gets to appoint a replacement judge and the Senate is allowed to confirm. This is not uncommon, especially at the Supreme Court level in Texas, that if somebody is figuring they're going to retire, they'll go ahead and retire and let the governor pick the replacement for the last year or two of their term. That way that person gets to run as an incumbent. They have some advantages. They also can say, the governor handpicked me, chose me for my qualifications. So what does it take to be a judge? So for the Court of Appeals and Supreme Court in Texas, we're going to have those partisan elections. It is a 6-year term, and the requirements to hold office are you have to be a licensed legal professional. You have to pass the bar in Texas and be licensed to practice law for at least 10 years in the state, and you need to be between 35 and 74 years old. The 35-year-old on the young side, that makes sense. If you go through, graduate high school at 18, let's say you get your undergrad degree in 3 years because you're just moving fast. So there is 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24 for 3 years of law school. 10 years is going to make you 34, 35. Before you can consider running for judge there as well. For district courts, those are going to be your trial courts in Texas. Same sort of elections. It's going to be a 4-year term, and you need, again, to be a citizen, a legal professional, and 4 years of experience. That's age of 25 there again, makes sense. That's going to easily get you to 25 to have 4 years of legal experience. What is a little odd in the state of Texas is that by the time you are 74, you are no longer allowed to run. So you hit 75, it's not like we kick you out of office, but we do say that you can be too old to be a judge in the state of Texas. You might think that's age discrimination. Since age discrimination is against older folks, not younger folks, you would not be wrong on that. But in Texas, it's the law. You're not allowed to run for a judicial office once you are past the age of 74. At the local level, for municipal courts, city courts, cities get to decide what the qualifications are to be a judge at the local level. Municipal court, cities get to decide. For some of the county courts, the counties get to make that decision. Okay, so court structure in Texas, that's where we're at. This is what the court system in Texas looks like. So as you start counting, you can start at the top. 1, 2, Supreme Courts, that's weird. We'll talk about that in a minute. Courts of Appeal, that's 3. District is 4 at the county level. 5, 6, 7 different types of courts at the county level, and then 2 more down here at the local level. So 9 different courts in Texas, as opposed to the federal system where it's just trial, appeals, Supreme. In Texas, we make it complicated. I'm sorry, it's just the way Texas does things. We have arguably the most complicated court system in the country. So let's break it down. That will help a little bit. So if we start down at the bottom, with local courts, that's going to be your city courts and your county justice courts. So these are going to be small-time stuff. So if you're in a city, chances are you get some sort of local ordinance violation, you have a traffic ticket, you have to pay some sort of city fine. That's going to be municipal cases. You're going to end up in municipal court. They're going to handle some small misdemeanors, shoplifting, municipal court. If it's a felony, if it's going to require jail time, prison time, you're not going to go to a municipal court. They're not designed to deal with that. Justice courts are kind of the county version of the same thing. So civil actions, small claims, lawsuits will go through county court. And then small-time crimes. Both of these are going to handle what are called magistrate functions. So this would be all of the various things that courts, judges have to do. Like marriage is probably the most common magistrate function that's going to come up. If you need a marriage license, you go to your local courthouse and get the certification taken care of. If you have some sort of problem in municipal court or justice court and you need to make the appeal, that's where you're going to end up in the county level courts. In county level courts, these are constitutionally set, so every county has to have at least one. At this point, you're going to kick in with the state level requirements. You have to have 4 years of legal experience and be licensed to practice law, which is not the case lower down. So these are going to have some civil lawsuits up to $10,000. They're going to have all juvenile matters are going to have to go through county courts. And you can kind of get an idea here. They're going to kind of run you through the different stuff. The big one, especially for the larger counties, is you're going to have specific probate courts. Collin, I believe, has a probate court. Dallas County absolutely has a probate court. Harris County absolutely has a probate court. What probate is if you die, your estate needs to be partitioned up. It's going to go to probate. So those sorts of property issues will be handled at the county court. That's the reason that they have a separate one, is some of those can be pretty complicated and drawn out. And larger counties where they have a bigger caseload, they split those off into a separate court. I skipped over this a minute ago. I'm going to go back to it. Just to give you an idea of what the caseload looks like. This is old, so this is data from 2003. Assume all these numbers have gone up. But the percentages should be fairly similar. So you can tell over here in municipal court, in 2003, there were 8 million cases in Texas. 82% of those cases were traffic violations. Assume it's still around 80% are traffic. Assume this number has gone up as more people have moved into Texas. We're probably looking at well more than 8 million now. At the county court level, it's about 3 million cases. Here, it's about 70% traffic. They're going to hit a little bit more of the criminal, non-traffic criminal stuff. And that's going to be, again, your small-time misdemeanors, and definitely more of your more of your juvenile crimes and low-level state crimes. So at the county level, here's your criminal breakdown. Now you're actually going to get to a lot more of the criminal cases. These are legit cases, very few traffic, as you might note. And the caseload is going to start going down. So 2003 is about 800,000. We're probably looking at 1 million or so cases these days. A lot more of the criminal stuff. Now you're actually seeing crimes that you recognize as crimes, so drug violations, lower level assaults, driving under the influence, that sort of thing. You're going to see some more civil stuff and a lot of probate. So that's going to be up here would be those probate cases. District court, this is your first true state level court. Strictly original jurisdiction, there's no appeals here. If you are arrested for a major state crime, you're going to go straight to state court, district court. You're not going to go to a county or a city court in the interim. So if you need to sue somebody for a larger amount, you're going to go to district court in the state of Texas. Any sort of felonies are going to go to a district court in the state of Texas. Felony juvenile crimes are going to go to district court. We're going to have some, and again, populated counties where we have specifically criminal district courts versus civil district courts. Smaller counties, they just throw it all in together. But district courts, as you kind of see the caseload here, you're going to see a lot more of the significant crimes. So here's your homicides, here's your felony assaults, robbery, burglary, major drugs. So this is not possession of a little bit of pot, but this is going to be like your trafficking sorts of charges are going to fill in the criminal side of these sorts of cases. Around 1 million cases a year in the state of Texas is what we're looking at. The biggest thing that you're going to find in district courts, if you head your way down to Dallas's district court or the district court here in Collin County, what you're going to find mostly on the docket are going to be these sorts of civil cases. Divorce, child custody, child support, all of those family law cases end up having to go through the state district court system here in Texas. As you work your way up, so from both county court and from district court, if you have appeals, we have the courts of appeals in the state of Texas. These are going to be kind of your middle ground, making sure your trial was fair. So courts of appeals, the breakdown here is you have a lot more criminal appeals than you have civil appeals. And note the caseload goes way down on these sorts of cases. And finally, coming from the appeals court, the Supreme Court level is next, and Texas is really weird. And by really weird, I mean there's only one other state that does it this way, and that state is Oklahoma. And Oklahoma does it this way because Texas does it this way, and Oklahoma just thinks that they are, Texas Junior. So Texas has what we call a bifurcated system. We have two Supreme Courts. So the one that we call the Supreme Court is just for civil cases and juvenile cases. And then the Court of Criminal Appeals is for criminal cases. And specifically, if we have a capital crime, so if you're convicted of murder or multiple murders, and we decide that we're going to put you to death in the state of Texas, we bypass the appeals court entirely. We send you straight to the Court of Criminal Appeals, and they're going to hear all top-level appeals for criminal issues. So this is what it looks like. Both of these Supreme Courts have 9 judges. This would be the Supreme Court over here. So lots of paper is going to happen down here, appeals. And they get around 4,000, probably more than that, closer to 5,000 cases maybe these days through the Court of Supreme Court, so Civil Supreme Court. Over here, on the criminal side, they get a lot more cases. Obviously, there's a lot more stuff that's going to pop up. On the criminal side, in terms of the appeals process, lots of habeas corpus. Basically, you can appeal that you've been arrested and not sufficiently charged, and all those cases are going to go straight to the criminal appeals court, and they're going to hear other criminal appeals. So this is what the state system looks like. I'll make sure I get this graph is going to be in the PowerPoint for you, so you can kind of follow along with the arrows and stuff and get an idea of what these things look like. We're going to hold off on judicial decision making. We'll get into some of the different issues that relate to Texas in the next video. I think this is more than enough for us at the moment. And I will sign off until next time. Have a good one, y'all.